If we only look at this section, no matter what the value of the UDS is, the value of IDS is a constant, such as the IDS equals 0.45 ampere. What does it mean? Do you remember the discussion about the current source? The property of ideal current source should be like this, so it is a current source property. In a simulation after this lecture, we will also show its current source properties. The value of the current source is 0.45 ampere, and it will change with the change of the UGS, so it is a current source controlled by the UGS. This is the second part. They are controlled sources. They may be divided into two parts. One is called the controlled voltage source. It refers to the devices which have the property of the voltage sources. It means the property of a voltage source in the UI plane like this. It may be the US, but the value of US is controlled by other voltage or current in the circuit. It could have two kinds of composition. The first type is a linear current controlled voltage source. We call it CCVS. This is a voltage source. We use a diamond to represent the controlled source, wherein using a diamond with a line through it to express a controlled voltage source. What parameter does control the value of the voltage source on Earth? It is represented by a control parameter R. This R is like the US in the independent source and similar to the R in resistor. Then we can get from the figure that the property of the right side port voltage is the property of a voltage source. But the value of the voltage source on the one hand is controlled by its parameter R. What's more important is that it is controlled by some branch variable or some current of the circuit. Similar, there is a voltage-controlled voltage source. If you are familiar with a controlled voltage source, it is easy to understand the controlled current source. The properties of the current source are controlled by the other voltage or current in the circuit. Similarly, it is a voltage-controlled current source. The symbols of the controlled current source are all diamonds, but the middle is a horizontal line for the controlled current source. We also have the current-controlled current source. So the linear controlled sources have four types. At last, we will talk something about it. We will be faced that the controlled sources are always drawn like this. So students may consider the controlled sources as a two-terminal element. It has two terminals. But why do we draw it as the four terminals in the previous slides? Although we often see it like this in the future, we should remember that it is a controlled source. The controlling variable is in a certain part of the circuit, that is a voltage. So it must be a four-terminal element. Second, we will discuss the relationship between the dependent source and the independent source. We have 2 points to mention. We use the voltage source as the example. Firstly, the voltage of the independent voltage source is determined by itself, so it is independent. Its properties are determined by nature. The value of the controlled voltage is determined by some variable. So it may show the properties of the voltage source. It's similar between them. But this is determined by itself, while that is determined by U1. This is the first difference. The second difference is more important. The independent sources are real energy or signal sources in the circuit, while the controlled sources are circuit models obtained from energy processing or signal processing components. In the future lectures, we will know that the controlled sources have a very important role in energy processing and signal processing circuit. Though its port features are similar to the properties of the power supplies, they just energy or signal processing components rather than the real sources of the energy or signal processing. Okay, that's the end of this lecture. Thank you.